Hi, I'm Gary White for Central Kentucky Television. I'm here with Kaylin Reed, who is a Marion County School Board member for District 2 here in Marion County. And we're going to talk about a question that's going to be on the ballot during the general election in November. It's been commonly called the nickel tax ordinance or question. So we're going to talk, that is going to be up for a vote in November. And the school board is looking to implement the nickel tax in order to help with buildings and facilities. Is that correct?
That's right, Gary. We have a pretty significant unmet need for our capital improvements that we need for the district, and basically the only way to fund those under the current scheme is to impose a nickel equivalency tax. So that's what the board has been looking at for about a year now. We've voted on it, and we're hoping that the community will support us in November when they go to the ballots.
So this nickel tax, tell us, what does that mean to the common individual?
Right. So if you look at your tax bill that you get on your property taxes every year, there's a tax rate. Mm-hmm. Right now for the school district, the tax rate is 55 cents per $100 of taxable property. So that's real property that you have, that's any tangible personal property that's taxable. What we are seeking to do is to raise that by the equivalent of a nickel. So for instance, if you live in a $100,000 home, mm-hmm. this nickel increase would increase your property taxes next year by $55 for the household. Right. If you have $1 million, it would be $550. So what we're seeking to do, and the important thing about this nickel, the way it's different than regular taxes, is that the state has matching funds. Mm-hmm. So by self-imposing this nickel, we will more than likely receive state matching funds that will allow us to undertake some significant capital renovations and building projects that we need to modernize our school district.
Now, for instance, I believe there's talking, like the superintendent was saying, currently Marion County school system is at a certain bonding level,
right,
which means the amount of money that the school board could get in order to do projects. Sure. By doing this nickel tax, it actually brings that bonding level up quite a bit. Right. Is that correct?
So just like if you go into a bank to borrow money for a home, they look at your finances and tell you what you can safely borrow based mm-hmm. on your income. We have a bonding agent who does the same thing for us. And based on our finances and our income stream, they've estimated that we have about $6 million in bonding potential, which sounds like a lot. But when you start talking about it costs $1 million to replace a roof in one of our buildings. That money doesn't go very far. Right. So the nickel initiative will raise our bonding potential from $6 million to about $26 million. So it'll give us about $20 million in additional bonding potential. The other thing it does, Gary, which is something that's so key, there are groups, legislative groups and executive groups out there who have a mandate from our legislature to help us and to help districts like us who have unmet needs that are beyond the scope of their bonding potential. So here in Marion County, we have about $40 million in unmet needs. We can raise our bonding potential to $26 million, but by imposing this on ourselves, we also open up the possibility of receiving additional grant money and additional funds. Like in Taylor County received about an additional $25 million on top of their nickel to help build their schools, which is how Taylor County is undergoing a $42 million building project right now for all their schools. So that's what we're hoping to do. We have to take the first step. We have to decide that education is important, and we have to decide that it's an investment in our children's future. And once we do that, there will be other avenues for us to receive some additional funding from the state.
Now, several years ago, this was proposed for a nickel tax, and it didn't pass at that time. What is different now for people to vote for this tax?
Well, if you remember, when this was first went through in 2008, that was during the middle of the stock market crash. The auto industry was in the midst of going under, the banks were failing, and it was just a very negative economic situation. Additionally, now 8 years later, we have the benefit here in Marion County of looking around and seeing the building projects. We see the buildings that have popped up in Nelson County and in Washington County and in Taylor County. We see what this nickel initiative has done for our neighbors. And the superintendent believes this, and I do as well. The value of your education and the quality of your education shouldn't depend on your zip code. So the fact of the matter is that our kids in Marion County they're world class. We have some of the best students anywhere. I'd put our students up against any district in the state. Our teachers are the same. I would put our teachers up against anyone. But our facilities are lagging behind. We haven't had a new school constructed in Marion County since the mid-1990s, and many of our buildings are approaching 50 years old. So it's time for us to renovate or rebuild some of these schools so that the next generation of Marion County students have the same advantages that the prior generations have had.
Right. And the additional tax can only be used on facilities. That's a mandate, is that correct?
That's correct. This money gets segregated, it gets put into a special fund, and it can only be used for buildings. We can't use it to buy books, we can't use it to buy computers, we can't pay for additional teachers, we can't give anyone a raise with it. Now, what will happen is the money that we've been spending each year out of our general fund as Band-Aid fixes, we will have the ability to do some additional programming because we're not going to be using that money on buildings. But yes, the money that's raised by this nickel initiative can only be used for building projects. And people say, well, how do we know? How do we know that's what it's going to be used for? There's about a 6-step process that has to happen before any of this money gets used. We have a committee that has to be formed. It has to have 20 members. It has to have members from the school board. It has to have members from the business community, from the governmental agencies. They come together and put together a plan on how to allocate these funds. That has to be approved by the school board. Then it has to be approved by the State Department of Education. Then bids have to be let out. They have to be competitively bid. So there's about a 6 or 7-step process. This is not something that's going to be swept under the rug. This is not something that the public is not going to have input in. There will be transparency at every step along every step of the way, so people know what this money is being used for.
And so the question is going to be on the ballot in November.
Yes.
It'll be a yes or no.
It'll be a for or against.
Right.
And we're encouraging folks to think about this and to remember this is for our students. This is for our future, and we're asking them to vote for the nickel initiative.
Okay, so the school board is asking for a for vote in that. Now, if the ordinance does pass, when would it actually be implemented?
It will be implemented on the 2016 property taxes. Now, there's a question of when those get sent out because typically property tax bills get sent out before the election. We're working through the logistics of that. Chad Mattingly, our county clerk, is very helpful along those lines. So when the actual bills come out, I'm not sure when that will happen, but the tax rate would be for the 2016 property tax rate.
And is it something that would be ongoing? So if it's implemented now, would it be on the tax bill indefinitely?
Right. So yes, it will. That 5.5 cents will be embedded into and consumed within our tax rates. And we understand that raising people's taxes is something that can cause a little bit of concern, and especially if you're on a limited budget. So what we have pledged to do, several members of my board have pledged that we will hold the underlying tax rate steady. You know, every year we have the ability to raise the tax rate to keep up for inflation and those sorts of things. And we can raise it 4% every year without any input from anyone. And what we pledged to do is for the next 3 years, if the nickel is implemented, we're not going to raise the underlying tax rate. We're going to hold it steady. And it'll give us a chance to catch up so that by 2019, we'll be in the same place we would have been, or probably even a little bit better off than we would have been. Plus, we get the addition of the state matching funds and these other things. So, you know, you're going to see a little bit of a difference in your tax rate, and what we're asking for is sort of an advance. We're asking for you to do it this year in a lump sum, the nickel, and allow us to use that money to bond for the future. And in exchange, we're going to hold the rest of the tax rate steady for the next 3 years, so it'll catch up, and ultimately it'll be a wash in the end.
And some people are questioning, so then why don't you just do that? But if you do the long term and do it that way, you don't get that additional bonding opportunity.
Absolutely.
Is that correct?
That's the key to this. You know, the tax rate itself, the 5-cent tax rate will generate about $600,000 a year. The state, when the match kicks in, the state will be matching that with over $400,000. Mm-hmm. So we would be giving away $400,000 a year by doing it the other way. We have given up over $2 million in the 8 years since the last time this came up. Mm-hmm. If we could go back in time 8 years ago and pass this nickel, we would have already seen an infusion of over $2 million in state funding that we've missed on. That places like Washington County and Taylor County and Nelson County have gotten. And Gary, it's our tax money. These agencies that are matching these funds aren't creating money. They're using tax revenue, and a portion of it comes from the taxes that people pay here in Marion County. So our money is going to build new schools in Washington County and new schools in Taylor County and new schools in Boyle County, and it's time for us to use our money to build new schools here in Marion County.
So for Marion County, several of the surrounding counties have already implemented the nickel, and some of them actually have more than one. Is that correct?
Yes. Now, the nickel that's available to us is this recallable nickel. There were other nickels in the past. There were growth nickels in the past, and there were nickels that were authorized by the legislature back in the 90s. And some of the other districts took advantage of those. So some of the districts have one or two or more nickels that they already have embedded in their tax rate. And what people need to understand is this is not something that's going to need to be done over and over and over again. This nickel will perpetuate itself, and after the bonds from the first nickel are paid off, we'll have an additional $26 million for renovations 20 years from now. So this is going to be a mechanism at no extra cost to the community that will roll over, and we will have a new building fund every 20 years that we can tap into for these long-term projects.
Okay. So again, I'm talking with Kaylin Reed, who is the District 2 representative for the Marion County School Board, and we're talking about the nickel tax ordinance that will be on the ballot in November during the general election. Everyone has an opportunity to vote. It is a whole county-wide.
It's county-wide, and we encourage people. You know, we know that there's some folks out there that have questions about this. You know, there's three groups of people. There's those groups who are very strongly in favor of this, and then there's a group that's very strongly opposed to this. But that middle, folks who want to support the schools but not sure this is the best way to do it and not sure that this is the best idea, we encourage you, reach out to a member of your school board. We don't agree on anything, Gary. We are 3-2 on a lot of issues, and in this issue we're united in 5-0 on this. It's been unanimously passed. And you know, talk to your magistrates and talk to your state representatives. You see Terry Mills, ask him what he thinks about it. Ask Jimmy Higdon what they think about it. You know, these are things that folks who have studied this issue understand. No one likes to pay more taxes. No one wants to pay any more than their fair share, but this is something that needs to be done in order to ensure that the next generation of Marion County students grow up in an environment and are educated in an environment where they can compete on a statewide, a nationwide, and a global level. And the fact of the matter is that we don't want to become a community where people work but don't live. We don't want to become a community where people come into work at our factories and leave at 5 o'clock and go back to outlying communities to live and to spend their money and those sorts of things. And we know that one of the most important factors in bringing people to our community is the quality of our school district.
Okay. So again, that question will be on the ballot, and the school system is asking for you to vote for the implementation of that.
Four.
That's right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary. Appreciate it.
All right. It's been Gary White for Central Kentucky Television.